I'm John Batchelor. This is The John Batchelor Show. The crisis in Ukraine continues. There are dark words from NATO, from Europe, about the edge of big trouble, gunfire trouble, or confrontation between major powers. We're going to come at Ukraine from another point of view to begin tonight. Gordon Chang, my colleague and co-host here from Forbes.com, joins, and we're very pleased to welcome our friend and colleague Arthur Waldron from the University of Pennsylvania. Gentlemen, I present to you, and I'll begin with you, Professor, this problem, not Ukraine, but the breakdown in comity at the Security Council level, or the P5+1 level. Right now, at loggerheads, to say the least, over Crimea, the annexation by Russia. Germany is mute. England is complaining about, notice I say England these days, Gordon, because the Scottish thing could go wobbly on them. England these days is complaining about France selling weapon systems to Russia, while France is complaining about England selling real estate to the Russians who are being sanctioned. Germany is mum because it's the third largest largest trade partner with Russia, and it needs all that natural gas. That's the status quo ante. Arthur, the problem I see it right now is we do not have an arbitration that we can trust if there's trouble anew, particularly trouble in Asia. Do you think right now that the world can withstand a gunshot in the East China Sea or the South China Sea? To be provocative. Good evening to you, Professor.
Well, good evening. I think that's what everybody fears most. And with the way that the Chinese are going after the Filipinos quite physically at a number of different spots in Filipino waters, and the way that they are threatening the Japanese, you have to think that at some point somebody's going to do something. And once a plane gets shot down or a ship is sunk, then there will be escalation, and it will be very, very violent, much more violent than people expect.
Arthur, I think that what we have is an illustration of the general principle that once one thing goes wrong in one part of the world, things go wrong in other parts of the world. And there are a lot of reasons for it, but, we've seen essentially over the last 3 or 4 years, and maybe even a bit before that, a breakdown of the general peaceful order that followed the fall of the Soviet Union.
That's right.
And right now we have a completely different world, which we do not, at this point, quite understand. And I think that essentially the Chinese see the Russians getting away with murder, literally, and they're going to probably do the same thing, because we've seen this in Second Thomas Shoal just a few weeks ago, where the Chinese have bragged about taking control of even more Philippine territory. I think all these bad guys, bad actors in the world are going to pile on, right?
Well, I think that the precedent has been set that you can not only take somebody else's land, but you can take somebody else's land, the sovereignty of which you have guaranteed, and that there is no punishment except a little bit of table pounding and some verbiage, and then economic sanctions. And we know perfectly well that all of those things will be withdrawn very, very quickly. So if an example like that starts spreading, then we basically have no world order beyond whatever it is that the military can impose.
Yeah, and we've been talking about this for quite some time, that the world next year or 2 years from now could be completely unimaginable to us today because of just this breakdown that you talk about. Essentially you have the Russians in a bold move, grab territory of the Ukraine, which they've guaranteed, as you pointed out, in that 1994 Budapest memorandum. We imposed sanctions on 7 individuals. Well, this is just pathetic. And, Putin can see this.
No, I mean, we didn't even withdraw our ambassador, although we're partly closing our embassy in Syria. I mean, there's no consistency at all in American foreign policy. So it may be useless, but it's not just useless, it's also very confusing.
I want to look at this from Beijing's point of view. Self-interest, fine. Okay, I'm sitting in the Central Committee, happy fellow. My family's worth several $1 billion, and I'm paid $19,000 a year. Is that all accurate so far, Gordon? Okay.
Yes, that's absolutely right. Bo Xilai was paid $21,000 a
so
year.
I'm sitting there thinking, how can we take advantage of this? Now, our Russian friends aren't all that reliable, but at this point, they're going to back us up at the Security Council. So East China Sea, we've declared the Air Defense Identification Zone. South China Sea, we're about to. We've got the Yellow Sea we could move into as well. Mm-hmm. We've taken the second Thomas Shoal. We've discomfited the Filipinos. Nothing bad has happened to us. Do we move on the Senkakus, or is there some other move that we're not looking, that they've long said, when is our moment? Gordon, go ahead.
You know, and here is something that's important, in that we've been talking about the Chinese economy. The numbers for the economy for the first 2 months have really been distressing. And Chinese leaders are going to wake up and they're going to say, oh my gosh, we only have a limited window of opportunity to intimidate the United States and neighbors. So this is very important to look at how all of this fits together, because the Chinese very well may decide that this is the moment that they've got to act, not just because of American weakness, but because of their own problems.
Let me try a scenario on Arthur, because we've talked about it, Gordon. Right now, Iran is an observer at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. That is China, Russia, and Central Asian states in what looks to be a trade in energy and some self-defense
anti-NATO.
promises. And they conduct military exercises. China and Russia have conducted exercises together. Right. What about, I present to you, that Russia decides to invite Iran into the Shanghai Cooperation Organization? That recalculates everything with regard to the P5+ warnings about the suspect nuclear weapons program. It empowers Iran, and it gives an opening to China to exploit their entry into the Gulf. Would that destabilize, or would that be a triumph for China? Your opinion, or Arthur?
Well, no, I think that would be something that China would like, but that they run the danger of becoming very overextended. So it might not turn out to be the best thing for them, but I think they would feel that was a definite feather in their cap.
And Gordon, I go to you on this. What Russia gets out of it is that it secures its relationship with what looks like the formation of a new bipolar world. We have Moscow, we have Beijing, we have Tehran, we add the Central Asian states, and we can throw Cairo into this mix because General al-Sisi is counting on Russian arms bought by the Saudis, and the United States stands with NATO. What's left of it?
Yeah, basically you have a bipolar world, as you point out. You've got two camps, and it's very much back to the Cold War. You know, people say, oh, you know, we don't want to have Cold War thinking. Right. But the point is, that's exactly where the world is headed to.
Finally, Arthur, I have to...
It began with the Cold War. I mean, it was the thinking was the product of the reality. It's not the other way around. But I do think that Gordon, you made an excellent point, which is that China may feel she has to preempt because she has spent so much on her elaborate military. And now the Japanese are getting very serious, and they're very, very ingenious about how they're going to defend themselves, and you never write them off. And there's a closing window in which the Chinese have superiority, even if they have superiority now, which is not clear. So there, as you say, there's pressure on the Chinese to move.
Finally, Arthur, just a tick here for the planned embassy by the First Lady of the United States and her immediate family, her daughters and her mother, to China. The news today is that there will be no U.S. or American correspondent on board. Are the Chinese going to take advantage of this? How do you see it, Arthur? Just quickly.
Well, I think the Chinese always take advantage of this. They're the master kind of dominant host who dominates you without your knowing it and makes you feel that if things don't go right, it's your fault. And they are desperate to have good news and sweet propaganda. And I, frankly, don't understand how we, the United States, got in the position of sending the First Lady and the two daughters to a country that is far and away the greatest human rights violator on the face of the earth today.
The biggest rogue state, Arthur.
That's absolutely right. And we treat it as if it were kind of Disneyland, which it most emphatically is not. And I think this is a terrible misjudgment.
Arthur Waldron is the Lauder Professor of International Relations at the University of Pennsylvania. Gordon Chang, my colleague of Forbes.com. I'm John Batchelor.